the cowboy who saved the Apache sisters and found a family on his ranch. Jack Callahan was a man of few words, the kind of cowboy people spoke about in whispers in the nearby towns. Some admired him, some pitied him, but almost everyone agreed on one thing. He lived alone, and he liked it that way. His ranch stretched for miles across the Arizona desert, with golden grasses waving in the wind and jagged cliffs in the distance. It was quiet there, save for the sounds of the horses and the occasional coyote howling at dusk. Jack liked it quiet. He liked the sense of space, the feeling that nothing could get to him out there. The ranch had been in his family for generations, though most of the family was gone now. He remembered the laughter of his brothers when they were children, the smell of fresh bread his mother baked on Sunday mornings, the warmth of a home filled with life. But those days were long gone. Fires, sickness, and accidents had taken everyone he loved. All that was left was him, the land, and a few stubborn horses that refused to be tamed completely. Some nights he would sit by the fire in the small cabin, listening to the wind sweep across the plains, and feel a deep, gnawing loneliness. Yet he told himself he was used to it. He had survived worse. That morning, the sun had barely kissed the horizon when Jack saddled his old horse, Dusty, and rode out toward the far edges of his property. A storm was coming. He could see it in the dark clouds rolling in from the west. The wind carried a chill he hadn't felt in months, and even Dusty seemed uneasy. Jack squinted at the horizon, feeling the first drops of rain on his weathered hat. Something about the way the clouds moved made him uneasy. He couldn't explain it, but a voice deep inside told him to check the ridges near the old canyon. As he rode, the landscape changed. The soft golden grasses gave way to rugged rocks and scrubby desert bushes. He had crossed this part of the land hundreds of times, but today it seemed different, almost alive with quiet danger. The wind picked up, rattling his saddle, tugging at his coat, whispering secrets he couldn't hear. He pressed on, knowing the storm would reach him soon, but something in his gut wouldn't let him turn back. That's when he saw it. A small, tattered blanket caught in the branches of a mesquite tree. At first he thought it was just debris left by the wind, but as he got closer, he heard a faint whimpering. Jack dismounted and approached carefully, hand resting on the grip of the revolver he rarely needed but always carried. The whimpering grew louder, and his heart skipped a beat when he spotted two small figures huddled together under the tree, shivering from cold and fear. They were girls. One older, maybe 12, with wide dark eyes that looked like they had seen too much already. The other younger, perhaps 9, clinging to her sister's arm, trembling. Their clothes were torn, their skin dusty and scratched from the harsh desert. Jack felt a surge of something he hadn't felt in a long time, something between shock and protectiveness. He had faced rattlesnakes, storms, and even thieves, but he had never come across something like this. "Hey," he said softly, keeping his voice calm. "It's okay. You're safe now." The girls flinched at first, eyes darting to the gun on his hip. Jack quickly dropped his hand, showing them he meant no harm. He knelt a few feet away, letting the horses graze nearby so the girls could see they weren't alone. Slowly, the older sister spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. They took our parents," she said. "They said we couldn't stay. We had to run." He didn't know the full story yet, but he understood enough. Danger had chased them here, and they had nowhere to turn. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a clean, dry blanket he always carried in case of emergencies. He wrapped it around the girls gently, murmuring, "You'll be warm soon. Come on, we'll get you out of this storm."
It wasn't easy.
The girls were scared, clinging to each other, and Jack had to coax them slowly onto Dusty's back one at a time. He led them back toward the ranch, the storm now chasing them with strong gusts of wind and sudden rain. Lightning split the sky, thunder shaking the ground beneath his horse's hooves. But Jack's focus never wavered. He felt a strange sense of purpose, a fire in his chest that had been buried for years. These girls needed him, and somehow he knew he would not fail them. By the time they reached the ranch, the storm had unleashed its full fury. Rain poured down in sheets, turning the dusty trails into slippery mud. Jack hurried the girls inside the cabin, lighting a fire in the stone hearth. The warmth and the flickering flames made the girls relax slightly, though their eyes still held that haunted look of children who had lost everything. Jack sat across from them, his old chair creaking under his weight. "What's your names?" he asked gently. "Marisol and Liana," the older girl said, her fingers clutching the blanket tightly. "Marisol is me. Liana is my sister. You're safe here. Nobody's going to hurt you. Not while I'm around." For the first time in hours, the girls let themselves breathe. Liana hid her face in her sister's shoulder, and Marisol slowly relaxed her grip on the blanket. Jack watched them carefully, remembering the way his own sisters used to cling to each other when life was hard. He felt a lump form in his throat. He had spent years living alone, telling himself he didn't need anyone. But seeing these two so small and so vulnerable, something inside him shifted. That night, Jack stayed awake by the fire, keeping watch while the girls slept in the spare bed. He listened to the storm outside, the wind rattling the windows and rain pounding on the roof. And he thought about what had brought them here. Their story was only beginning, and somehow he knew it would change his life forever. The loneliness he had carried for so many years began to feel heavier, and yet, for the first time, he felt hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, he could give these girls something they had lost, and they could give him something he thought was gone forever. Morning came, bright and warm after the storm passed. The desert glistened, fresh and alive, and Jack brought the girls outside. Dusty nickered softly, as if greeting new members of the family he had long since imagined. The girls laughed for the first time, chasing each other in the wet grass, and Jack allowed himself a small, private smile. They weren't just survivors, they were fighters. And somehow he knew their presence on the ranch was not a coincidence. Life had a way of bringing people together when they needed it most. Jack watched Marisol and Liana as they explored the ranch, noticing the careful way they approached the horses, the curious glances at the cattle, the joy in their eyes as they discovered small wonders of ranch life. He realized that this day marked more than a simple act of rescue. It was the beginning of a bond that would change them all. He had rescued them from the storm, yes, but they were about to rescue him from a life he had accepted as lonely and unchanging. Jack Callahan, the quiet cowboy who had spent years surviving alone, now felt something stir in his heart, a sense of family, of responsibility, of connection. The wind still whispered through the desert, but for the first time in a long while, he didn't mind. He had found his reason to face each new day, come rain or shine. And so, life on the ranch began anew, with Jack, Marisol, and Liana stepping into the unknown together, bound by courage, trust, and a hope that maybe, just maybe, they could all find a home in each other's hearts. The days after the storm were bright and clear, with sunlight spilling over the desert like gold. Jack Callahan worked on his ranch as usual, repairing fences, checking the horses, and tending to the land that had been his only companion for so long. But now there were two small figures following him wherever he went. Marisol and Liana were quiet at first, watching him from a distance, their eyes full of curiosity and caution. Jack noticed the way they paused before stepping onto the dirt path, as if afraid of making a mistake. He smiled gently to himself. It reminded him of how careful children could be when they had been through something terrible. "Come on!" Jack said one morning, crouching beside a muddy water trough. "You can help feed the horses. Don't worry, they won't bite. Not unless you're mean to them." The girls hesitated, but then Marisol stepped forward first. She reached out her small hands and began to scoop the oats into the horses' feed buckets. Dusty nuzzled her shoulder and she giggled, a sound that made Jack feel a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Liana followed suit, her small fingers trembling but steadying as she poured the feed. Jack watched them carefully, his eyes softening. "You're naturals," he said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The sisters exchanged a small smile, and for a moment, it seemed as if the shadow of fear that had clung to them was lifting. Jack wanted them to feel safe, wanted them to understand that the ranch could be more than just a shelter. It could be home, but he also knew trust would take time. He had learned long ago that the world could be cruel, and he had seen what fear could do to children. He wasn't going to rush them, and he wasn't going to force them to feel something they weren't ready for. Each day, Jack taught them a little more about life on the ranch. How to check the fences for broken boards, how to bring water to the animals, how to read the weather by watching the clouds and wind. The girls were eager to learn, soaking up every bit of knowledge as if it could protect them from the dangers of the world. Jack admired their resilience. Marisol was clever, quick to understand, while Liana was patient, careful, and surprisingly brave for her age. They worked together naturally like a team, and Jack began to see something he hadn't in a long time: hope. At night they would gather around the fire, Jack telling stories of his childhood and the ranch's history. He spoke of his parents and siblings, of times when the land was filled with laughter and life. The girls listened in silence at first, but slowly they began to ask questions. "Did you have a sister?" Liana asked one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack paused, staring into the fire. "I did," he said softly. We lost her a long time ago. I was very close to her. It's hard to explain, but sometimes you carry the people you love in your heart, even when they're gone." Marisol's eyes glistened. "We lost our parents," she said quietly. "It's why we had to run. We didn't know where to go. We were scared." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of their words. He couldn't imagine the fear of being so young and alone in a harsh world. "You don't have to be scared here," he said. "Not anymore. I'll keep you safe." Trust was slow to build. Some days the girls would cling to each other, wary of his every movement. Other days they would explore the ranch with cautious excitement, testing boundaries and discovering small joys. A butterfly landing on Marisol's hand, the gentle nuzzle of a horse. Jack let them explore, knowing that freedom was just as important as safety. One afternoon, as Jack repaired a broken fence along the edge of the canyon, Marisol approached him carefully. "Can we ride with you?" she asked, her dark eyes wide. Jack looked at her, surprised. He had been expecting hesitation, not a request to join him. "Sure," he said, "but you have to listen. The horses can be unpredictable if you don't pay attention." They mounted the horses together, Jack leading the way with Marisol on Dusty and Liana on a smaller, spirited horse named Sunny. The girls were tentative at first, gripping the reins tightly, but as they rode along the dusty trails, their confidence grew. They laughed as the wind whipped through their hair, and Jack felt a lightness he hadn't experienced in years. He realized that teaching them wasn't just about survival, it was about life, joy, and belonging. But not everything was calm. Jack noticed moments when the girls would pause, glancing toward the distant cliffs or the horizon, as if sensing danger. Sometimes they would freeze mid-step, eyes wide, as if memories of running from unseen threats had returned. Jack didn't push them. He understood that fear was something that had to be faced slowly, with patience and care. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the ranch, Marisol spoke quietly. Do you think we'll ever see our parents again?" Jack's heart ached. He had no answer that would be easy or comforting. "I don't know," he admitted honestly. "But I do know this. You're safe now. You have each other. And you have a home here. That's something no one can take from you." Marisol nodded, gripping Liana's hand. I think I like it here," she said softly. Liana smiled shyly, her small hand squeezing her sister's. Jack felt a wave of relief. Small steps, but steps forward. They were beginning to heal. The days passed, each one blending into the next, but Jack noticed changes. The girls laughed more, their steps became lighter, and they began to help with chores without hesitation. Marisol even started keeping a small journal, sketching the ranch and writing little notes about their day. Liana spent hours caring for the animals, brushing their coats and feeding them with a careful hand. Jack admired their growth, feeling a sense of pride he hadn't felt in decades. But Jack knew the world beyond the ranch was not as forgiving. He had seen enough greed, anger, and cruelty to know that danger often followed those who were vulnerable. He couldn't ignore it. Sometimes when the girls were asleep, he would ride the ridges, scanning the horizon for signs of trouble. The desert could be beautiful, but it could also hide threats that were not always easy to see. He didn't tell the girls about this. He didn't want to frighten them again. Instead, he prepared quietly, ready to face whatever might come their way. One afternoon, Marisol asked Jack about the other people in town. "Do we have to go back?" she asked nervously. "I mean, to the places where people might hurt us?" Jack shook his head. "Not unless you're ready. You're safe here. We'll figure everything else when the time comes. Right now, you just need to learn and grow and be kids again. That's the most important thing." The girls smiled, their eyes bright with a new kind of hope. For the first time, Jack realized that they weren't just surviving. They were beginning to live. And in teaching them, guiding them, and protecting them, he felt a new purpose forming within him. He wasn't alone anymore. He had a family of sorts, fragile and new, but real nonetheless. As the sun set over the horizon, painting the desert in shades of orange and pink, Jack sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the girls play near the horses. The wind whispered through the grasses, carrying a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. He knew challenges were still ahead, and that the world outside the ranch could be harsh. But for now, he allowed himself to simply watch, to breathe, and to hope. Jack Callahan, the quiet cowboy who had once believed he was destined to live alone, now felt the stirrings of something he hadn't dared to feel for a long time: connection. He had saved Marisol and Liana from the storm, but in return they were saving him from the life of loneliness he had carried for decades. He realized that sometimes family isn't just born, it's made through trust, love, and courage. And as night fell over the desert, the stars twinkling like distant fires in the sky, Jack knew one thing for certain: whatever dangers the world might hold, they would face them together. Marisol and Liana were no longer just two frightened sisters. They were part of his life, part of his heart, and slowly, they were becoming part of his family. Life on the ranch had settled into a quiet rhythm, with Jack teaching the girls how to live with the land, and the girls slowly learning to trust him. Marisol and Liana had grown braver with each passing day. They could feed the animals, help repair fences, and even ride the horses without fear. Yet Jack knew that the world outside his property was not always as kind or safe as his little haven. He had seen too much to ignore the warning signs. One morning while Jack was checking the far fence line near the cliffs, he noticed something unusual: tracks, footprints in the damp earth from the storm the night before. They were not the tracks of animals. These were human, fresh, and heading toward the ranch. Jack's heart sank. He didn't know who they belonged to, but he could sense danger in the way the prints were scattered, like the people were moving carefully, hiding their approach. He followed the tracks cautiously, Dusty moving silently beside him. The girls were inside, helping feed the chickens, laughing and unaware of the world closing in outside their safe walls. Jack paused at the edge of the ridge, scanning the desert beyond. The tracks ended near a cluster of rocks. Whoever it was had gone quiet, but Jack could feel it. They were close. Back at the cabin, he called the girls inside. "Marisol, Liana," he said firmly but softly, "I need you to stay close to me today. Can you do that?" The girls nodded, sensing the seriousness in his voice. Liana's small hand found Marisol's, and together they followed Jack as he walked toward the ranch gates. Jack's mind raced. He didn't know if the people outside meant them harm or if they were just strangers passing through, but he couldn't take chances. For the next few days, Jack watched the horizon carefully. He taught the girls how to spot movement in the distance, how to listen for sounds carried by the wind, and how to stay quiet when necessary. It was both practical and educational, but more importantly, it gave them confidence. Marisol would crouch by a window scanning the land, while Liana helped Jack repair the fence lines that had been weakened by the storm. Despite the danger, the girls continued to grow stronger and braver. Jack noticed Marisol taking initiative, asking questions about the animals, and even suggesting ways to improve the water troughs. Liana, who had been quiet and shy at first, began to speak more freely, laughing with her sister and even teasing Jack when he made a funny face. Jack smiled at their resilience, realizing that these moments of laughter were small victories, proof that they were healing. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and painted the desert in shades of orange and pink, Jack sat on the porch with the girls. "I want you both to know something," he said. "This land, this ranch, it's ours. Nobody can take it from us. And I'll do whatever it takes to protect you." Marisol looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Even if it's scary?" she asked. Jack nodded. "Especially if it's scary. That's when it matters most." The next day, while checking the northern boundary near a small canyon, Jack saw movement. A group of men had appeared at a distance just beyond the line of sight from the cabin. They were well hidden behind rocks and bushes, but their intentions were clear. They were searching. Jack's heart tightened. He didn't know exactly what they wanted, but he knew instinctively that it had something to do with the girls. He returned to the cabin quietly, careful not to alert the intruders. Marisol and Liana were playing with a small wooden horse toy, laughing as they imagined a race across the ranch. Jack's chest ached. He wanted to protect their innocence, to keep their world small and safe for as long as possible. "Girls," he said gently, "we need to be extra careful today. Stay close to me, and don't wander too far." The rest of the day passed with tension lingering in the air. Jack kept watch from high points around the ranch, signaling to the girls when it was safe to move or play. He even taught them small ways to stay hidden, how to crouch behind bushes, how to move quietly, and how to spot danger from afar. The girls were attentive, understanding that these lessons were not games. Their trust in Jack grew stronger with each passing moment. One evening, as the sky turned a deep purple and stars began to twinkle, Marisol whispered to her sister, "Do you think they'll come here?" "I don't know, but Jack said we're safe." "That's enough." Jack overheard this and felt a pang of pride. The girls were learning not just to survive, they were learning to believe in safety, in trust, and in the possibility of a home. However, danger was closer than they realized. That night, Jack noticed movement near the edge of the property, a shadow flickering among the rocks. He grabbed his flashlight and quietly approached, keeping himself between the intruder and the girls. It was difficult to see clearly, but Jack's instincts told him that these people were scouting, not passing through. They were looking for something, or someone. The next few days were tense. Jack prepared the ranch discreetly, reinforcing fences, clearing paths, and teaching the girls basic safety habits. He didn't want to frighten them unnecessarily, but he wanted them ready. Marisol and Liana learned to trust his instructions, following him without question. Jack noticed their courage growing. It wasn't just about hiding or following rules. It was about understanding that they could face challenges together. During one particularly quiet afternoon, the girls helped Jack fix a broken gate. Liana looked up at him and said, "I don't want anyone to ever hurt us again." Jack knelt beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Nobody will," he promised. "Not as long as I'm here. And not as long as we look out for each other." The storm of danger was still out there, but Jack knew that preparation and courage could make a difference. He didn't want to live in fear, and he didn't want the girls to either. He focused on teaching them resilience, responsibility, and awareness. Each lesson, each small task, strengthened their confidence and their bond. One morning, a hawk soared high above the ranch, circling and screeching. Jack watched it carefully, sensing a metaphor in its flight. Life could be unpredictable, even dangerous, but there was also beauty, freedom, and strength to be found. The girls were beginning to understand this too. Marisol pointed to the hawk and said, "Look, Liana, it's so free." "It doesn't have to be afraid." "Exactly, and we're going to learn how to be brave like that too, not without caution, but without fear controlling us." The days continued, and though the threat outside the ranch remained, Jack, Marisol, and Liana adapted. They moved with care, stayed alert, and strengthened their bond. Jack noticed small moments that gave him hope. A laugh shared over a spilled bucket of water, a quiet conversation under the stars, a game of chasing the chickens in the yard. These moments reminded him that life could be joyful even in the shadow of danger. Jack also began to reflect on what it meant to protect someone. It wasn't just about keeping them from harm. It was about giving them confidence, teaching them to make decisions, and helping them grow stronger. Marisol and Liana weren't just children in need of shelter. They were becoming young, capable individuals who could face challenges with courage. As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in fiery shades of red and orange, Jack stood on the porch of the cabin, watching the girls play. His heart was heavy with the knowledge of the dangers still out there, but it was also full of hope. They had faced fear together, learned to trust each other, and begun to find strength in the bond they shared. Jack knew the road ahead would not be easy. The world beyond the ranch could be cruel, and the people searching for the girls might return. But he also knew this together, they could face it. The girls had learned courage, and he had learned that protecting someone wasn't just about fighting threats. It was about teaching, guiding, and caring. That night, as the stars sparkled above the desert and a soft breeze rustled the grasses, Jack sat with Marisol and Liana by the fire. They talked quietly, sharing stories and dreams, and for a while the world outside didn't exist. Here in this small cabin in the vast desert, they were safe. They were learning to live again. They were becoming a family. Jack Callahan, the quiet cowboy who had once thought he was destined to live alone, now understood something important. Danger might always be near, but courage, love, and trust could make even the harshest challenges bearable. And with Marisol and Liana by his side, he knew they could face anything the world might throw at them. The desert air was dry and still that morning, with the rising sun painting the horizon in shades of gold and pink. Jack Callahan had been awake for hours, checking the ranch from one end to the other. He had reinforced the fences, cleared paths around the property, and even placed small markers where he could spot anyone approaching from a distance. Marisol and Liana were inside, helping with breakfast, and unaware of how close danger had been in the days before. Jack hoped it would stay that way. He wanted them to feel normal, to feel safe, even if the world beyond the ranch was not. As the morning wore on, Jack heard a faint sound on the ridge, the crack of twigs under careful footsteps. His instincts kicked in immediately. He grabbed his flashlight and quietly crept toward the ridge, with Dusty following silently. Peering through the rocks, he saw 3 men moving slowly, scanning the ranch as if they were looking for something, or someone. They didn't know he was watching. Jack's heart pounded, but he stayed calm. He had to think, to plan, and to protect the girls. Returning to the cabin, he called Marisol and Liana close. "We have to be extra careful today," he said quietly. "Some people might be nearby. You need to stay with me at all times, do you understand?" The girls nodded solemnly. Marisol's dark eyes were steady, while Liana's small hand clutched her sister's. Jack could see the fear in them, but also determination. They had learned from him that courage didn't mean being unafraid. It meant facing fear while doing what was necessary. Jack spent the morning moving through the ranch, keeping the girls close. They worked quietly, repairing a fence that had been weakened by the last storm. Every now and then, Jack would glance toward the ridge, making sure the men hadn't moved closer. The girls followed his instructions without question, and Jack felt a swell of pride. They were not just surviving. They were learning to act with caution, intelligence, and bravery. As afternoon approached, the men finally made their move. Jack spotted them attempting to approach the cabin from the north side, hiding behind rocks and sparse bushes. He signaled to the girls to stay inside and out of sight. Marisol and Liana understood instantly, ducking down as Jack moved to intercept.
Jack did not panic.
He had faced storms, wild animals, and the harshness of the desert before, but this was different. This was about protecting those who had no one else. He moved silently, positioning himself between the intruders and the cabin. The men hadn't expected anyone to be watching. When they realized they were discovered, they froze, unsure of what to do next. "Who are you?" Jack called out firmly, his voice steady and commanding. "What are you doing here?" The men hesitated, exchanging nervous glances. Jack could see that they were trying to intimidate him, but he stood his ground. "I said, who are you?" he repeated, his eyes never leaving theirs. The leader of the group stepped forward, trying to appear confident. "We're just passing through," he said, but his tone was shaky. Jack could tell he was lying. Jack didn't reply immediately. He had a plan, and he needed to be patient. Slowly, he moved closer, using the terrain to his advantage. He wanted to make it clear that the ranch was protected, that he would not let anyone threaten the girls. Marisol and Liana watched from the cabin window, their hearts pounding, but their trust in Jack unshaken. After a tense moment, Jack spoke again. "You need to leave. Now. This is private property, and these girls are under my protection. If you don't leave, you'll regret it." The men hesitated, then slowly backed away, realizing that Jack was not a man to be underestimated. They turned and disappeared into the desert, leaving the ranch quiet once again. Jack let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He walked back to the cabin, Dusty following closely, and found the girls waiting anxiously. "It's okay," he said gently. "They're gone." Marisol and Liana rushed to him, hugging his legs tightly. "You protected us," Marisol whispered. Liana's small hand clutched his coat. Jack felt a warmth in his chest, a mixture of relief and pride. He had kept them safe, and in doing so he had strengthened their trust in him. For the next few days, Jack maintained a watchful eye over the ranch. The girls helped him reinforce fences, stock water supplies, and organize the cabin so that they could move quickly if needed. Jack continued to teach them about the land, about how to notice changes in the weather, and how to stay alert. But he also allowed them moments of joy, riding horses, exploring the ranch, and laughing together. He knew that balance was important. Courage and vigilance were necessary, but so was happiness and hope. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Marisol approached Jack. "Will they come back?" she asked quietly, her dark eyes searching his. Jack knelt to meet her gaze. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we'll be ready if they do. And you're not alone anymore. You have me, Liana, and each other. That's stronger than anything they can throw at us." Marisol nodded, taking comfort in his words. Liana hugged her sister, and Jack felt a deep sense of pride. The girls were not just learning to survive, they were learning to trust, to act with courage, and to believe in the safety of home. The days that followed were filled with small victories. The girls learned to track animals, to repair fences on their own, and even to navigate parts of the ranch that had once intimidated them. Jack watched them with admiration. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and danger, and they were growing stronger with each challenge. One afternoon, while the girls played near the horses, Jack noticed movement on the ridge once more. But this time, he wasn't afraid. He signaled for the girls to come inside, and they obeyed without hesitation. Jack positioned himself where he could see clearly, ready to confront whoever came near. As the men appeared, Jack stayed calm, using his knowledge of the land to keep them at a distance. He guided the girls quietly inside, showing them how to remain hidden and stay safe. The intruders moved cautiously, unsure of the terrain, while Jack used every advantage he had to protect the ranch. By the end of the day, the men retreated once more, realizing that they could not threaten the ranch or the girls. Jack watched them disappear into the distance, a sense of relief washing over him. He knew the danger was not completely gone, but he also knew that he and the girls were stronger than before. That night, the three of them sat by the fire in the cabin. Marisol and Liana were tired but happy, sharing stories and laughing softly. Jack smiled, feeling a deep sense of connection. He had faced danger, protected those he cared about, and taught the girls to face fear with courage and wisdom. Jack knew the road ahead would not be easy. Challenges would come, and the world beyond the ranch could be harsh. But he also knew that together they could face anything. The girls had learned courage, trust, and the strength of family. And Jack had learned that protecting someone wasn't just about defending them from harm. It was about teaching them to be brave, to grow, and to believe in themselves. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Jack sat quietly on the porch watching the girls sleep peacefully. The desert was still, and for the first time in a long while he felt a sense of calm. They had faced the storm of danger together, and they had emerged stronger, wiser, and closer than ever. Jack Callahan, the quiet cowboy who had once believed he was destined to live alone, now understood something important. Courage, love, and trust were the strongest protections of all. And with Marisol and Liana by his side, he knew they could face any challenge the world might bring. Together they were a family, forged in the face of fear and strengthened by hope. The days after the last confrontation passed quietly, almost peacefully. Though Jack remained vigilant, he knew the world outside the ranch could never truly be ignored, but for the first time in years, he felt a sense of calm settle over him. Marisol and Liana were thriving, their laughter filling the cabin and the ranch grounds. The small home that had once been quiet and empty was now alive with energy, curiosity, and warmth. Jack had taught the girls about the land, about the horses, and about survival. But he had also discovered something even more important: the healing power of family. Jack watched the girls one morning as they explored the edge of the canyon, careful not to get too close to the steep drop. Marisol pointed excitedly at a lizard scurrying across the rocks, while Liana carefully picked up a smooth stone and examined it like a treasure. Jack smiled quietly to himself. They had learned to notice the small details of the world, to find beauty in everyday things, and to trust that the land could be a friend, not just a challenge. "Careful there!" Jack called gently, stepping closer. "Don't go too near the edge."
Yes, sir, Marisol replied with a smile. Liana nodded, clutching her sister's hand.
Jack felt a warmth in his chest. These small moments of obedience, trust, and joy were more important than anything else. They reminded him that the girls were not just surviving, they were beginning to truly live. Over the next weeks, Jack continued to teach the girls more advanced ranch skills. He showed them how to ride without fear, how to guide the cattle, and how to handle small emergencies around the property. Marisol was eager and clever, quickly learning each new skill and asking questions about everything she saw. Liana, thoughtful and patient, learned to care for the animals and manage the tasks around the ranch with quiet confidence. Jack was impressed by their determination, but more than that, he was moved by the way they trusted him completely. One afternoon, while Jack was fixing a broken water trough, Marisol approached him. "Jack," she said, her voice hesitant but determined, "do you think we could stay here forever?" Jack paused, wiping sweat from his brow and looking down at her. He had hoped this moment would come, but hearing her say it out loud still touched something deep inside him. "Marisol," he said softly, kneeling to meet her gaze, "you already have a home here, and you always will. You and Liana are part of this family now. You don't have to worry about that." Liana, standing beside her sister, smiled shyly and hugged Jack's arm. "We feel safe here," she said quietly. "Like we belong." Jack felt a lump in his throat. He had spent so many years alone, carrying the weight of loss and solitude, and now these two small girls had brought life back into his world. He realized then that protecting them wasn't just about keeping them safe. It was about loving them, teaching them, and letting them become part of his life. As the sun set over the desert that evening, Jack, Marisol, and Liana sat together on the porch of the cabin. The wind carried a soft, cool breeze, rustling the grasses and filling the air with the scent of the earth after a rare rain. Jack watched the girls' faces illuminated by the warm glow of the fading sun and felt a profound sense of gratitude. They had come to him at a time when he was alone, and in return they had given him purpose, hope, and love. The next few days were spent preparing for the coming season. Jack showed the girls how to plant a small vegetable garden, how to keep track of the weather patterns, and how to ensure the ranch would thrive even during harsh times. The girls worked together, laughing as they dug in the soil, and Jack watched with quiet pride. These simple tasks, once mundane and lonely, had become moments of connection and joy. One evening, as they gathered around the fire, Marisol asked, "Jack, do you think our parents would be proud of us?" "I think they would," he said gently. "They would be proud of how brave you've been, how much you've grown, and how strong you've become." And they would be proud that you found a place where you're safe, loved, and cared for. The girls smiled, their eyes shining with emotion. Liana leaned against Jack's shoulder, and Marisol held his hand tightly. In that moment, the small cabin in the desert was more than just a home. It was a sanctuary. It was a place of healing, trust, and belonging. As the months passed, the ranch flourished under Jack's guidance and the girls' growing help. They learned to care for the horses, tend to the animals, and manage the daily tasks that kept the ranch running smoothly. Jack taught them not only skills but also values: courage, patience, respect for the land, and the importance of helping others. The girls absorbed these lessons eagerly, their confidence growing each day. One morning, as the girls helped feed the animals, Jack noticed a hawk soaring high above the canyon. He smiled and pointed to it. "Look at that," he said. "It's free, strong, and brave. You can be like that too in your own way. Always remember that strength comes from inside." Marisol and Liana watched the hawk, their eyes reflecting its flight. "We can be brave," Marisol said quietly. Liana nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. Jack felt a sense of pride swell in his chest. They were no longer frightened, uncertain children. They were strong, capable, and full of hope. By the end of the year, Jack officially made the girls part of his family. The local authorities had ensured their safety, but Jack knew that the real home they had found was on the ranch, with him. The cabin that had once been quiet and empty was now filled with laughter, love, and warmth. Every corner of the ranch held memories of their journey, of fear, courage, learning, and ultimately, belonging. One afternoon, Jack and the girls rode together through the desert, Dusty and Sunny leading the way. The sun glistened off the golden grasses, and the wind carried the scent of the earth and wildflowers. They rode in comfortable silence, each feeling the peace and connection that had grown between them. Jack glanced at Marisol and Liana, smiling at the way they rode confidently, guiding the horses with skill and care. "You've both come a long way," he said quietly. "I couldn't be prouder." Marisol laughed. "We've had the best teacher," Liana added shyly, "and the best home." Jack felt a deep sense of fulfillment. In saving the girls from the storm and the dangers beyond, he had not only given them a chance at life, but had also found a family he never thought he would have again. The ranch was no longer just land and buildings. It was a place of love, growth, and hope. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows over the desert, Jack, Marisol, and Liana returned to the cabin. They sat on the porch watching the sky change colors, the wind whispering through the grasses. Jack knew that challenges might come in the future, but for now they were together, safe, and stronger than ever. Jack Callahan, the quiet cowboy who had once thought he would live alone forever, had found something far more valuable than solitude. He had found family, love, and hope in Marisol and Liana. Together they had faced fear, learned courage, and built a home filled with laughter and trust. And in the vast quiet desert, they knew they had each other, forever. The ranch, once a lonely place, now pulsed with life. The horses neighed softly, the wind carried the scent of blooming desert flowers, and the girls played nearby, their laughter ringing clear. Jack watched them, feeling a sense of peace and happiness he had not known in years. He realized that sometimes life brings unexpected miracles, people who appear when they are most needed, love that heals wounds, and courage that grows from the simplest acts of trust. Jack leaned back in his chair, letting the warm desert breeze wash over him. Marisol and Liana ran past, chasing each other in the yard, their laughter echoing in the evening air. Jack smiled. He had saved them, yes, but in truth, they had saved him too. They had given him a family, a purpose, and a home. The sun dipped below the mountains, the desert bathed in twilight, and Jack knew one thing with certainty. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Marisol and Liana were no longer just two frightened sisters. They were part of his life, part of his heart, and part of his family. And in that moment, under the wide, endless sky of Arizona, Jack Callahan felt whole.